Good morning.
Good morning.
I love the admit all button. I didn't realize it was there, and it's so handy.
Clutch.
Fudge. Oh, well, welcome.
Me?
The
Yeah.
women are coming in.
I don't know. You want to do it? No.
If you are, let's see,
Okay.
you don't mind
Good.
muting yourself.
You want to do something else?
Hey, Rhonda, do you mind?
Did you say something to me?
Oh, I just invited you to mute yourself.
Oh, I was said that I was on mute. So sorry.
Oh, it's
I
okay.
did it.
Okay, we will begin shortly. Just letting everybody in. Is Nancy, are you on? Have I seen you?
I saw her a second ago. She was there. I don't.
Okay. I wonder if I can have her be in charge of letting people in. So Nancy, if you're out there.
I don't see her, but you can also make me co-host if you would like, and I can share that responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, and we would encourage everyone, if you are able to turn on your video, we would love to make this as interactive and feel as much like we're in the same room as possible. So we'd love for you to turn on your video if you're able. I know some of us are not all in situations that allows it, but if you can, we'd love to see your faces.
We would. Okay. Maybe give it a few more minutes.
Yeah.
And we are also recording this just so you know. Can I mute? Hold on.
Okay, we
There
muted.
we go. Yeah. We are recording, so just keep that in mind. It will go out to you if you want to revisit some of what we talk about. But we just want to be able to, sometimes yeah, you want to revisit a few of the things. So we'll provide that, but also just so you know, like if there's some moments where we'll invite you to participate a little bit. So just be aware of if you're wanting that recorded or not. So, well, welcome. Um, it is. You gotta love it. You gotta love Zoom. Gotta well, welcome. It is so good to see some of your faces and to see a bunch of names that are interesting and yeah, we're grateful that you're spending your whether it's early morning or late morning with us. I'm Heather Stringer, and yeah, we wanted Tara and I discussed this notion of desire probably a little over a year ago, maybe it was longer than that, year and a half ago, and just realizing that this notion of desire, especially as it relates to women, is a really contentious, confusing, problematic thing. And so we have felt this longing, our own desire to begin to flesh out, like, what does it mean to be both a woman and a woman who longs for things, who wants things. Um, and so we would love to bring you into some of what we think through, what we're kind of cultivating as a way of finding our path to being a woman who is full of desire. So we'll go over a little bit of that today. But I'm here sitting in New York City. I have two kids, Amos and Iona, and my husband Jay, who's in Guatemala right now. And yeah, it's been a long journey for me to know what it means to be in touch with my own longing and to assert my longing. And so I have not arrived in any way, but it's been a beautiful process, a beautiful and hard process of becoming someone um, who is seeking desire. So I'd love to introduce Tara. She is a really wonderful human who I've been able to work alongside over the last year and a half. She has such a wellspring of compassion and grace and a tenderness that you just immediately want to
Besides,
follow and be part of whatever she's creating. So, Tara, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Um, just want to reiterate for those of you who are just coming into the room, we would invite as many of you as possible to come on video because we very much kind of the posture of our hearts is not for us to be like the ones with all of the answers, but for us to be in a conversation. And we want this morning to feel like that. And so for as many of you as are able, we would love to see your faces. It's okay if there's no makeup on them. It's okay if you're still drinking your coffee first thing in the morning. That is the reality. Like this is a safe space for women. So would love for you to do that. As Heather said, my name's Tara and I am in sunny Florida. And handle Pensacola, if you're familiar with where that is. So we are across the United States from each other. Both towards the East Coast. But yeah, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and love being a part of this work. As Heather said, I also have such a personal journey of what is it like to own my own desire? What is it like to see my desire as good and to bless it rather than to see it as bad? And I'll talk a little bit, we're going to get a little bit into our own stories as we talk, but and so I very much feel like I, am in this process and have and in this process of inhabiting my own desire, my own body and my own will. And so really excited to be on this journey with you guys. And am so blessed to work alongside Heather Stringer. She is a sage and just a priestess in her own way, and so I am so thankful to get to work beside her and beneath her influence. And so so glad that you guys are all here. So glad that we can be exploring this together. As I said in the blog, welcome to the table. We're just all sitting together.
So just a quick overview of our time together, and hours on a fly. So we'll try and get to the majority of this content. We're going to talk about why desire, what is desire, the obstacles to desire, and then how to move through them. Hopefully we'll have some time towards the very end where if you have any questions, we can address that, and then we will also just share with you some of the offerings that are upcoming this fall that we'd love for you all to participate at whatever capacity you have. First, if we can just take a minute, like why we had 72 people sign up. We posed this, I think, just a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. Why are you here? If there's one or two, three of you that wouldn't mind sharing a bit, but why are you at this coffee hour? What was it that drew you? We'd love to kind of hear a bit about that, if you're willing. And I know there's pressure on those with the video on, but if you don't have your video on, you can talk too. Or if you can put your comment in the comment section, if that feels better. But why are you here? Hannah says, on a journey of healing that's related to desire. Clarice says, I kill desire, I'm shut down.
I don't, if it's okay for me to not turn my video on, but share. I just got back from a walk. I'm super sweaty and gross. But I am here because I feel like I've been also on a journey and I'm now a therapist. And Heather, I've heard you speak several times in different contexts on hypoarousal. And I just feel like it's such an unaddressed issue when it comes to our sexuality, specifically for myself and then for other women that I work with. And so I'm so grateful for what I have heard you speak. And so anytime I see something that you're doing pop up, I feel myself going, oh, this is one of the few people I think that are speaking about this from a Christian perspective that feels nourishing. So thank you. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Amy. Thank you for saying that. But yeah, the hypoarousal piece is something that just hasn't had a lot of attention or even research or exploration. Um, let's see, take a couple more. Katie says, I am in a new relationship and I quickly realize how afraid of desire, both expressed and received, I am due to purity culture beliefs put on me long ago. I want fun and freedom, and my therapist recommended you. Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. There was a hand raised. Jules, did you want to speak to that?
Hi, yes, sorry. I'm also chasing little kids around the house, so I'm doing this on mobile. Um, but I was raised in like Katie in the purity culture, and I'm married to my husband for 15 years. And we have an incredibly beautiful and complicated marriage surrounding the pornography topic and as a victim of childhood sexual abuse. So desire has always been something, it's been like that piece of our marriage that we're like, we'll get to that eventually. Um, and now we've hit a beautiful 15 years, and it just feels like we're both in a place where we're strong and grounded and rooted enough to start uncovering this piece. So I'm really excited. My husband has read your husband's book, and um, so I've just been following along this journey and decided to jump on.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jules. Katie relates to that. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit. It's good to hear like the collective voices and not just my voice or Tara's voice. And I just think the reality is like I mean, there's so much grace for this journey. Um, and I get distracted when I hear those sounds. I'm like, up, get on track, come on. Um, but it's desire is meant to be complicated. It's meant to be something that we have to be on a journey with. It's not something that we should just know, or have arrived. And so, yeah, grateful that we're here together in this process of recovering it and reclaiming it. So, Tara, you're gonna step in and speak to the why desire.
Mhm, mhm. So you guys have already spoken to this, right? Just in the few women who have gotten to speak, have already began sharing some of why we're here. And I think, if we look at the kind of women globally, we're looking at women, we have said such a complex relationship with our desire. It is not as kind of cut and dry for us as it would be for men, because part of that is like we are acculturated to being in a supporting role, right? We know that as even as young as sisters and as wives and as mothers, our job is to support others for their benefit, right? It's to hold them up. And that's so much of what we're taught from a very, very early age, even in play as children, whether it's Barbies or dolls or whatever it was that we did, it's oftentimes in a supporting role. And while those roles can be really satisfying, it feels good to nurture, right? Um, we are in some ways designed in that way for that to be satisfying. It is very rarely the entire picture, right? That is a slice of the truth. And so what we still have inside of us is our dreams and our goals and our imaginations and our strengths that we know live inside of us that are not necessarily for the benefit of the nurturing of someone else. And so then we are we're in this position where we're kind of made to be at war with that desire. Because what does a woman do with this desire that continues to linger and continues to kind of come? We try to push it away and suppress it and put it in a closet and make it feel tidy, but it just keeps coming. It keeps coming out. And so that can feel scary. It can feel like our desire threatens our relationships. How does, if I do what I want, right? If I can actually access my desire and express it, what does that mean for my marriage? And what does that mean for me as a mother? And what does that mean in my church? Right? What does that mean in my job? And so oftentimes our desire can feel like a threat to us. And so we push it down. Um, and this is part of the hypoarousal that we've been naming, right? We push down our desire because oftentimes we don't know what to do with that. Um, and we can feel then when we don't know what to do with this desire, but we have it and it's pushing through, it's coming out, we can feel like we're suffocating in our own lives. We can feel trapped and stuck. And it can create resentment and bitterness in our lives, which comes out in our relationship with our children, and it comes out in our relationship with our spouses, and it just comes out as an overall kind of feeling of dissatisfaction and discontent, knowing that we're made for more, but we have no idea how to access that more that we can feel brimming inside of us. Another way, and then what happens oftentimes too is not only are we suffocating without it, then we have to find ways to express it or find ways even to access it. Some of us don't even feel like we have access to our own desire. And then when we do have access to our desire and we find spaces where it can actually breathe, where it's got some breathing room, oftentimes because it feels like it's going to threaten our relationships, that comes out in the secret, right? That the only places that my desires can actually even come out is in these kind of small and hidden and kind of very passive and even invisible ways, right? So that might come out. So it comes out in these little ways, and that can look like unwanted sexual behaviors, right? That can look like addictions like shopping or exercise or a little too much wine just to get me through the day. Anything that we can do to soften the blow of a life that feels so mundane and so much less than what we know we're created for. And so, and if you're familiar with Heather's husband's work, this is that deprivation and entitlement seesaw that he talks about. We live deprived all the time, suffocating. And then because we're suffocating, we find these spaces where we're like, okay, but I can do this and this will make me feel better. And I'm entitled to that because I'm deprived in so many other ways. And so that's some of us, but then, well, I want to come back to one more piece is that what happens when our desire is only expressed in these kind of secretive ways, then we say in our field, right, that the psychology would say that neurons that fire together wire together. And so if the only time that I can express my desire and have access to my desire is in the secret and in the darkness, it automatically feels bad. And when it feels bad, I just continue to suppress it. And it just reinforces the deprivation. It reinforces that suppression, right? And so we're stuck in these cycles for years and years, and we don't know how to get out. Well, then others of us, that's not all women, right? Some women have lots of access to desire. It feels like it's like brimming. It feels like it's just like oozing out of our pores, right? It feels like, yeah, I'm actually a person I have lots of opinions about things, and I'm passionate in my relationship, in my marriage and romance, and I am driven in my profession, and I have thoughts and I have creativity and I express this creativity, right? There's some of us women who have a lot of access to desire, but there is such a high price on that for us, right? The high price of oftentimes it began, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but it begins with our mothers, right? Our mothers who see us and see this access that we have to our desire and our ability to express it, and it creates contention from the get-go, right? And we learn really early what to do then with that desire. It can affect our social relationships with other women, right? We're not quite quiet enough or small enough, or we can feel like I'm too much for this group, and others can feel like we're too much. And so there's a pushing back, and it can be bullying, it can be mean girls, right? We all know, I don't know if, middle school adolescence is the worst about that oftentimes. right? And I don't know if you've had experiences like that, but man, I know that I have. And then we have all of this desire, and oftentimes a man sees that desire and he wants to possess it. He wants to have it for himself. He sees a woman with desire, and his first thought oftentimes is not, let me sit back and support her, right? But I want her. I want to have her for myself. And then thirdly, organizations and institutions see a woman full of desire, and they want to use her. They want that desire also for themselves. They want to use it for their end, not for her end. And so, and so we've got these, as women, we have done something of one of these two things with desire. We have suppressed it, or we have embodied it and paid the price of that. And for many of us, we've been both. I don't know if any of you I really identify with, I've actually expanded and I've expressed, but I have also shrank and I have contracted and constricted in myself. And so there is this kind of, just like the breath in our lungs, we expand and we constrict and we expand and we constrict, but not without pain, not without so much pain in the expansion and in the constriction. And so our breath reminds us of what we're made for. Our breath, even as it inhabits our lungs, tells us we are made to expand. And it's also okay, right, to constrict when we need to, but not for others. And so that is why we're here. This is something of, why are we talking about desire? Because this is our war. This has been our battle for so long. Heather, I cannot hear you. You unmuted, but I can't hear you.
No, now?
Yes,
No,
now good.
I can't.
Okay.
I think I was like low in my voice. I was at the lower range. I was like, it's good. Um, yeah, so the next question is, I think probably all of us on some level are wondering, it's like, what is desire? I'm sure as you heard Tara speak, there was something of like, I know what she's talking about. I had that visceral reaction of like, yep, I know that. I know the expansion. I know the costs of expansion. I know when I've been required to constrict, when I've been used, and where that has felt both, good and degrading. So the question then is just like, what is this thing? What is desire? I want to step into that a little bit. Um, Desire comes from the etymology of the word is desidere, which is, to be expected, like longing, wanting, even expecting. But then if you break it down even more, to desidus, that is Latin for from the stars. And so there is this inner and outer conversation that we are having with our desire. The inner conversation is like, what quickens my heart? What stirs? What am I like? What do I feel livened by, that I want more of? But then also, if you think about it from the stars, like it's like a North Star kind of notion, where we're also in conversation with, I would say, God and the world around us. So it's this inner and outer conversation that we're having with, like, I feel this desire, and also I'm following something. I'm yearning for something that's outside of me that leads me. And so with desire, I think there's something to be said of, it awakens us to this possibility that there's more than what is right here and now. And this isn't just sexually. I think sexual expression is this really core place of where our desire comes up, through us. But it's also, how are we creating? What is your imagination like? It's your sensuality. Like, as you're eating food, are you tasting it? Are you allowing the food to awaken you and for you to want more? Are you drinking your wine slowly so that you can actually taste the tannins? It's also relationally, like, how does desire show up in your relationships? Do you find yourself preoccupied and kind of always following, where is my spouse? What are they doing? How are they? Are they relating to me okay? Or is it that we're avoidant and we kind of stay at a distance, untouchable? Where is our desire in relationships? And then there's the spiritual piece too. Like how is it as we're relating to God? Where is our desire there? And if we're orbiting, if our North Star, if our God is a God that is rigid or is more shame-based around what we want, then we're gonna respond accordingly. Um, and so it's important to know, like, how is my relationship in all these areas, and what are they speaking to? What are they saying about what it means for me to want? Is it good, or is it something that I need to temper or to kind of confine? So when we come in contact with what we want, whether it's a baby, a marriage, a different kind of job, we open ourselves to the possibility of greater risk, greater disappointment, greater shame even, but also greater pleasure, greater love. We open ourselves to having a bigger heart, bigger capacity to live in this life. And that is part of the dilemma, is that when we come in contact with what we want, we're opening ourselves to so much heartache, essentially. And so if we're going to be women that are in contact with our desire, then it means too, we need to be in contact with our grief. Like, how do you grieve? How do you get close to moments when you are so disappointed that what you wanted did not come through? What do you do with those moments? Because otherwise, if we're not tender and if we're not tending to where we've wanted and it's fallen short, or where we've wanted and we were met with you're stupid for having wanted, then we're going to turn ourselves off, or we're going to find kind of these side doors to like soothing or kind of getting what we want, but it doesn't actually open us up. It doesn't open us up to more in the way that I think we're intended for. So women of desire means we need to be women of grief. And scriptures tell us, I think this is the thing that scriptures say that keeps us in this tension, in which, Jesus says that we're to bring heaven on earth. We get to have these experiences of goodness, right? We get to taste and have these moments of shalom. And yet it will never be fully completed or fully fulfilled on this side of heaven. Right. So we're in this tension always. And that, I think it's important for us to realize, like, oh, this is what it means to be human and what it means to be in relation to God, is that the already and not yet. We get to have moments of heaven, and we will never be fully satiated. And so how do we remain open as we're in that tension? But then I think also the reality is, when we are becoming more alive with what we want, there's also tension of how that aliveness begins to disrupt the world around you, right? When you see an alive woman, like, it's hard not to envy her. It's hard not to want what she has. So we become more visible when we become alive, and that can be a really contentious place of, I don't want to be visible. I don't want to see the eyes of others looking down at me or telling me I'm a fool, or shaming me for having wanted. And all of us have early childhood stories where, when we were alive and we were wanting, we were met with a face that wasn't of delight. A face that wasn't saying, that is so beautiful, you are so beautiful, keep going, keep running after that, keep being in your body, being more alive. So that's why it's so important that we tend to those family of origin stories. That we tend to what shaped our relationship with our desire. How was it marked by our parents? How were we marked by them with how we wanted, with how alive we felt in our bodies, and what was the experience like? And then we move into culture. How did culture then, whether it's purity culture, whether it's culture at large, how did it then reinforce that? How did it change the way that you related to your desires? These are things that it's important for us to see, because then when we tend to those stories, we will realize we'll be able to correct those stories, so that then when we know when we want, we're not as vulnerable to what people do and say to us about it. And we'll have a sense of like, this is good, what I want. Doesn't mean that it has to be just like this. It means that I'm going to continue to open myself to wanting. So Tara is going to bring us into just the realities of what we've all been in with what it means to have desire, and the fact that there's a long history. Like, we come from a lineage, all of us have lineages where to be a woman of desire was a risky thing. So we'll step into some of the obstacles of what it means to be a woman of desire.
I'm going to share a little bit of my story, but I want you, as you listen, to think about the places where perhaps my story and your story intersect, that there's places where perhaps you felt something of this as well, and have borne witness to other women who have also done that, who have also experienced these things. Okay, my desire has been like Hagar, despised, scorned, and left to wither and die alone in the wilderness. Scapegoated as the problem, masking a whole host of dysfunction and bearing the burden of the sins of others in my very own body. Deposed and silenced by those in greater authority, the one remaining option was to cast desire out of me, out of my body, out of my relationships, out of my life. The sacrifice that took on the sins of many when they were unwilling to look at their own reflections honestly. So my desire bore the lies, but could not bear the weight. And so it collapsed, left with a single burning question: God, do you see me? But before I was Hagar, I was Eve. In youth and naivety, I was unsuspecting of the words dripping with honey, believing that they were pure and sweet. Captivated by the one captivated by me. My eyes widened and my gaze lingered as they beheld the manifestation of my unspoken longings. My body awakened at the sights and sounds of possibility and power and prowess, believing the unbelievable, too high to feel the claws enter my back and the chains close around my ankles and wrists. Whiplashed by the plummet, stunned by the trick, and ashamed of my foolishness, I was injected with contempt and ejected from my home, but addicted to the high, quite literally captivated. Left with the question, God, could you, and if you could, would you save me? But before I was Eve, I was Samaritan. In a body that was different from those around me, obviously a cross between this group and that one, rejected by one and alien to the other, alone in my skin and my experience. Born of a Samaritan mother who had herself been abused and discarded, and who had to learn how to adapt and overcome within a culture of patriarchy. Sexuality became identity, and this, I learned, was my most valuable asset. Modeled by the parents in front of me, I learned that my inherent goodness, intelligence, and sensitivity were of no use, only as valuable as they were useful for power and protection. And the most cunning thing that I could do was to trade them in for frivolity and sexuality, as these were the building blocks of success in this world. So I buried the true me so deep that I forgot who I was and instead became who I needed to be. Empty, unseen, and rejected inside, with my compass in the hands of the approval of others, I navigated life as I was told, left with one question: God, can you find me? And then one day I met the one who blessed my desire. The hand of the Lord was on me. This is from Ezekiel. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and he set me in the middle of a valley, and it was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. I looked, and I saw the bones of Hagar and Eve and that Samaritan woman. of the beautiful and abused Dinah and stunning and used Sarah, the shrewd and deceptive Rebecca, the barren and dying Rachel, the labeled and redeemed Rahab, the wise and just Deborah, the scheming and swift Jael, and the pleading and aching Hannah, the courageous Queen Esther, and the desperate woman with the issue of blood, the shamed and restored Mary Magdalene, the heartbroken Mary, mother of Jesus, the generous deaconess Phoebe, the hospitable and skilled Lydia, the smited Sapphira. He asked me, O daughter of woman, can these bones live? And I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. And then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. And so I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound. The bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and the tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, daughter of woman, and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says, come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life, and they stood upon their feet, a vast army. And then he said to me, daughter of woman, these bones are the people of God. They say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone, and we are cut off. And therefore prophesy to them, saying, this is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of the living, and then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord, when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. And so in this is what Heather and I are here for. We are here for the awakening, for the dry bones to come to life, to wear tendons and flesh, and to have the Spirit of God enter your lungs again. This is what we believe God can do and that we can do as we bear witness to one another. This is the hope that we have, that as we enter into the grief, as Heather so beautifully just said, that in this we will also come alive. This is what we invite you into. Heather mentioned that there are, and you could hear within my story, each of us have experiences of our childhood, right? And our childhood stories of we learn how to navigate. You heard that some of in my Samaritan woman story, right? We learn how to navigate the norms of our childhood. We learn the roles and the rules and the norms, and we conform to those. We learn how to be successful and accepted and approved of within our own experience. And then, and those are the stories that need our tending. Secondly, we then grow into adolescence and early adulthood, and we are naive. And you heard this in my story with Eve, that we don't know what we don't know, and we are so easily taken advantage of. And in that naivety, we are harmed. And we learn that desire feels, as Heather said, it's a threat. It can feel like if I allow desire to exist, then it can be consumed by another. And oftentimes we've experienced harm of this in our early adulthood. We have this blind trust because we haven't learned otherwise. And then the third barrier between us and our desire is culture. And you heard this a bit in some of the Samaritan story, is that we are told, whether that might be purity culture tells us what we can do with our desire. Pop culture tells us what we can do with our desire, what is cool and right and acceptable according to the kind of greater, the greater dominant culture narrative. Also our cultures in terms of our ethnicity, our race, there's often also norms within that we are told what to do with our desire. And so these are the stories that need excavating. These are the stories that need the word of the Lord and the spirit of the Lord to fill them and to bring them back to life. Heather.
I want to share briefly just some of my own story as it relates to desire, and why again it's so important for us to know and to see the truer narrative of our stories, because I so often as children we make certain conclusions about the meaning of what we've experienced that is actually false, right? Like for example, I am too much for my parents, for my mother. Oftentimes that is the conclusion that we made as a child, and it's actually false. It's a way of being able to make sense of our worlds. And so as we make sense of where we come from, um, I think it then begins to allow us to be free to know, like, oh, envy's coming towards me when I'm alive, when I'm pressing into desire, or oh, this is someone who's actually wanting to use me, and I have recovered myself, and therefore I'm going to say no. I'm going to find my holy no. For me, finding my protest, finding my no, has been a life, like so far, it's been my lifelong journey. My family of origin was that my mom was pretty elusive, harder to find, but my dad was very much present, and he became even a bigger player in my life once I became an adolescent. Once I was burgeoning into womanhood, and I began to do what adolescents do, which is to leave the family and look at other peers to find oneself, to find their identity outside of the family. As I began to do that, my dad became more and more intrusive, more and more needy. And this especially came to a head when I was exploring sexuality, and he had a sense of like, she is doing stuff with her body that I need to know about and I need to be in possession of. And so there are these stories that, again, I used to tell my story as a comedy. Like I could tell the story and make people laugh. And until I started doing my own work, it became more of this tragedy that I needed to tend to. And so realizing that that like if I want something, and if it's not in alignment with the most dominant person in the room, then I need to be hidden. So my dad taught me that if I'm going to have desires that differ from him and that threaten him, then I need to go underground. I need to be very hidden with what I want. And what happened in that is that arousal became linked to hiddenness. Desire became linked to hiddenness, especially when it was in relationship to another. And if someone wanted something from me, it became more of a threat, and I had to kind of give my dad what he wanted, like appease him, and so that I can kind of be autonomous over here, and I could do what I want over here. And that has played out in my friendships, that's played out in my marriage, where I will appease Jay, say, okay, you want something from me, it's too threatening, I'll give you something to appease you, to back you off, and then I'm going to be alone with what I want. So finding my no has been a really important process of how do I say no in a way that disrupts but allows my desire to grow. Because when I have a no, that's not the be all end all. It's then the point in which I get to find what is my yes. What am I going to say yes to? How am I going to give myself? If I get to belong to myself, then how do I get to give myself to others? How do I get to lean into my desire that will be disruptive, but disruptive in a way that is not to be hidden, but to actually cause flourishing to happen, not just internally, but also externally. And so again, like if you think about like that scenario with my dad where it's like my body does not belong to me, and then you put it into the culture that I was in, which is the purity culture, where it's like, again, my body does not belong to me. And then culture at large, it's just, excuse my French, but it's a clusterfuck. Like it's just a cluster of fuckery. Sorry. I apologize for those who I just offended. It's just like there's no other way of being able to describe it. And so why I think, again, why it's so important to excavate, I love that word that Tara used, is to excavate these stories, because then we get to recover and reclaim. We get to say, my desire is good. My desire might need to be refined. It might need to go through a process of transformation. So it's not that we have to be rigid and like hold on to our desire tightly, but it's to say, this is good. This comes from a sacred, holy fire within me. And it's worthy of protecting, and it's worthy of disrupting systems and relationships. So let me just see where I'm at right now. So part of what we're going to step into is just, well, then if you're identifying the obstacles to desire, if you're identifying the barriers, then like, how do you move through them? Part of this will be some of our offerings in this this fall, with kind of stepping in more intimately, more in depth with like, how do you move through family of origin, cultural, adolescent issues that have kept us from our desire. But we're just going to name 3 briefly, and for the sake of time, we'll try and be brief so that we can have a little bit of time to answer any questions that have come up. The first is what I've already emphasized, is like the work of like, where do you come from? How did your parents respond to your aliveness? How did they respond when you had expression? Because that's all linked to desire. A desire awakens. Desire makes us move. Desire makes us speak. Desire makes us want to sing, want to do cartwheels. It brings a lot of life. I have a video footage of me as a 4-year-old just being so cute and alive and funny. And you hear my dad, who's holding the video camera, and he says, "Heather, be yourself." Like, what does that mean? Like, how am I as a 4-year-old? How am I supposed to make meaning of that, other than to say that when I am full of life, I am not myself. So what are those stories? Where have you been marked? How have you been shaped to relate to your desire in ways that might be more distorted? And then for me, as some of you probably know, like the role of ritual is really important. It helps us orient to where are we in our story, through having symbols, through using our sensuality, of like tasting the bitterness of, I have known so many stories of being used, and I need to feel this. I need to know it on a visceral level of what I've been in, not to recreate the trauma, but to honor the trauma, to honor what you've been in. So how do we mark different parts of where we are and where we're headed? It also helps us, I think, stay in the tension of the already and not yet, like what I spoke about earlier. Heaven on earth, but it's not going to be fully fulfilled on this side of heaven. Like, how do we stay in that tension? We need containers that help us stay in the tension of, I want so much and I'm not promised that I'll get it. And I feel like even now, I feel the grief of that reality for all of us. So how do we honor that reality? How do we bring our bodies and our souls and our hearts, and how do we bring others into honoring that reality? Like, I might need to make myself, it's as simple as like making myself some tea, to say like, I have to feel the heat of what it means to be in this body, in this present moment, and I'm going to allow that heat to nourish. Because it is better to not be closed. It is better to not wane. It is better to still remain open, but we need soothing. We need witnesses. We need to find ways to be present to that tension and to that reality. Yeah.
And another way that we can tend to our stories, how do we move through these obstacles, these things that stand between us and our desire. Another way that we can do that is through embodiment. Many of us implicitly and explicitly have been told to observe ourselves from the outside. Our bodies are valuable in terms of their appearance. And that's how we have learned to relate to our bodies. But a woman who is full of desire has to be able to experience and feel that desire from the inside. And so another way that we move through these obstacles is to learn to inhabit our own selves. What I call embodiment. And it's this idea of if you think about what does it look like what's the difference between living inside of a house versus observing a house from the outside? And that's an analogy that Hillary McBride offers in her book, Wisdom of Your Body. We need to begin to take steps to live inside of our bodies. And so this can be everything from how do I feel somatically, the smallest things from, you know, am I comfortable in the way that I'm sitting right now? Am I breathing deeply or is my breath shallow? Uh, am I hungry or am I full? These are little things that as women, we often had the conversation in one of my groups last year. Is like, why is it so hard to know if I have to pee? Right? Like, why do I wait till the very last second to know that I have to pee? Yeah, because we've got so many things going through our minds and we're so busy and we're so disembodied. We're so disconnected from our bodies. It's something that's so small and so simple, right? And yet it is this manifestation. It's a microcosm of what it is to be a woman, right? That um, we are made to be desirable, but not desirous, right? And we want to begin to take that step, not just to be desirable to another for their possession and for their use, but to be desirous for our own selves. And so this looks like allowing ourselves to grieve our harm. That when my body wants to collapse into the grief, that I can actually allow that and move into that grief. That when my body wants to dance and sing and jump for joy, that I can actually move into that as well. That I can fully inhabit my physical body because and that allows me to more fully inhabit my life. That I refuse to live this muted and shrunk existence, right? That neither laughs and dances nor mourns, right? But instead that we actually have this full range of what it is to be alive. And we begin practicing that in our bodies, moving into our bodies, and rather than standing on the outside of them. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. And so we want to have a little bit of time for Q&A. But before we do that, we want to let you know about the offerings that we have coming up. We've got a workshop, which we have not figured out the dates for yet, but Heather and I will be doing a workshop to be able to expand on some of the concepts that we've talked about here today. We have our fall groups. So our groups are a group of 4 to 6 women with either Heather or myself, where we will actually be doing all of this work. So we will be moving into these stories of harm in childhood and early adolescence and early adulthood. And into our adult lives. We'll be moving into those stories, excavating those stories, grieving that, and allowing the spirit to move into those spaces. We'll be practicing in those groups with ritual and with embodiment. Those are all part of what we do in those groups. As well as you'll be reading and watching. We'll be looking at film. We'll be looking at all kinds of, kind of looking at all different aspects, different senses in order to be able to engage, to be able to engage our bodies and our stories and to awaken desire inside of ourselves. Um, and then if you want to bring any of this that we're talking about to your church or to your organization, there's also an opportunity for that. So maybe you want to do a group, or maybe you want to come to our workshop, but maybe you'd like something that kind of tailored for your group. So that's also available. Most of you probably have gotten an email from Nancy at Women of Desire. And so you can contact her for that as well. So let me pause right there. Heather, anything else you want to say about our offerings before we move in?
No, that was great. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. So we've actually got someone here from our groups, last cohort. Andrea is gonna kind of she's gonna turn off her mic, and she's gonna talk a little bit about what the group experience was like for her, so that you can get kind of the participants' experience of the group. Andrea, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So I was just excited to jump on this because for me as a Christian who grew up in purity culture, I was deeply impacted by that messaging in my developmental years. And I pursued a lot of resources and even intensives, but without hesitation, this group has provided the most healing and forward momentum. So I just wanted to share a couple of things about this. If you're on the edge, I was totally on the edge about it. I really appreciated the pacing of the course. It's not too much, but it's definitely intentional and has the effort and reflection through the week that's required, but it keeps you engaged throughout it. And the experience of engaging this material in a small group was more powerful than I expected, as the stories of other women gave me new language for my own. And it also made me feel a lot less alone. The curriculum, it made me contend with my emotions in a way that I would not have naturally pursued. There are definitely things that I wasn't as comfortable with, just because it wouldn't be something I would seek out, but I'm so thankful for the invitation to do that. And while the new insights were really helpful for me, so were the points of resistance. And so I would also say that, well, counseling has been profoundly helpful for me in identifying my need to pursue my tendency to shut down desire. There was something about this group with the homework and the movies we watched, the books we read, and the interaction with other group members that accelerated the therapeutic process after the group ended. And so I would, as far as my impact, I have not arrived. It's not a quick after the end, but it has impacted my parenting right away. It's impacted the way that I notice my boys engaging with their own desire and their freedom with their young bodies. It's impacted my marriage, providing new language, frameworks, and insight into both sexual and non-sexual desire with my husband. And it's provided more clarity and confidence in engaging my story. So it's helped me to enter into my story as a little girl instead of retelling it as a simple description of the events that have taken place. So those are just a little bit how I could describe it, but I'm open if there's a question or a specific feedback from just a participant who went in and said, let's see what this is about. So is the question in the chat for me or no, for somebody else?
Thank you, Andrea. It's so helpful to hear. And I think what you're saying, like just that the variety and the angles of engaging desire is so necessary. It's not, I think sometimes we get so single-minded of like, it just looks like this. And in actuality, it shows up in a lot of variety of ways. So to have stories both like as participants sharing their stories and that collective goodness that comes from essentially saying me too, is, yeah, I think it's such a helpful and meaningful experience.
I think
Does
that was like just a surprise for me is when you talk about desire, I would think, oh, it's so personal. It needs to be a one-on-one connection. And I guess just as a participant perspective, like the group process of engaging desire is a lot more powerful than I expected like
Yeah.
a year ago. So
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions for Andrea? If not, no worries. I think she answered. I mean, I feel like you covered everything really beautifully. So, um,
Or for Heather and myself, we've got, well, and I know we're at the top of our time, but
top.
Yeah. Um, do we have time for Q&A, Heather? What do you think? No, yes, no?
I mean, I have a meeting right now that's not like it's a group meeting, so I can kind of show up a little bit late. So I have like a minute or two that I could stay on for. Also be aware of your time, everyone's time. But
Mm.
yeah, I see Kendra's question around contentment. Um, she said for a long time I saw contentment as basically the absence of desire.
Mm.
So when people ask me, "Are you content in your singleness?" I would feel so much shame because I have never not wanted a relationship. Recently, I heard someone say contentment isn't the absence of desire, but experiencing Christ's sufficiency in the midst of your desire. So maybe it's not so much a question, but wait, is there a question there? Oh, just talking a little bit more about contentment. Yeah, I think that, I mean, so beautifully asked and put, and what a horrific question to be asked. Like, are you content in your singleness? Um, it's just not how we're meant to be in the world. Like, we're not, I think contentment is, I think there is something about Christ's sufficiency that brings about, I can kind of stay in the tension of the already and not yet. But if the movement towards contentment is to eradicate the tension, then there's something underneath that I think is not trustworthy. It's, I think so often it's hard for people to be in the tension of, oh, here's a woman who's single. I don't want to get close to like her desire and the fact that it's unmet. I think it's hard for us to step into the tension if we don't have answers, if there isn't a guarantee. And so, yeah, I think there's something of like, how do we remain in the tension in a way that's kind, but doesn't like annul what we want, that doesn't suppress what we want. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Tara.
Yeah, we love to put things in a dichotomy. We are ever putting things in this or that. And it just feels unfair. It feels unfair to say desire or contentment. That there's like, that's what Heather's saying, right? That there's like a tension within the two, that they are both good. Um, you know, we are reaching, right? We are reaching for greater glory, greater fulfillment, to as what does it look like for heaven to come to earth? Is that just contentment? Yes, there is peace, right? We want the peace that surpasses understanding. We want that, right? And yet also there is Paul said, I press forward for what I was created for, right? I pressed forward. And so there is a constant, like, yes, that I have peace and can have contentment, and I am pressing in and I am pressing for more. And so, yeah, we live in the tension of that. And it doesn't feel fair to ask for one or the other. That they, like, again, like I always go back to the breath of like expand, contract, expand, contract. It's both, right? It is both desire and then also content. And we can find peace. And then we can desire for more and we can find peace.
Mm-hmm. I think about, I know we're just kind of up on time, but, and this is going to be kind of a strange example, but I think about drinking a glass of wine where there's so much contentment with that first glass of wine, where it's like, oh, I feel loosened, I'm enjoying this drink, it's opening me up to conversation. Like it feels like it's tapping into longing, to be quite honest with you. But then there's just the grief, and there's a contentment there. But then there's this moment where like it stops, right? It begins to wane. And there's this part of me that's like, ooh, let's keep this going. Add another glass of wine, which never goes well, right? It's not horrible, but it's just, it begins to taint and it begins to kind of sabotage that moment. So I've been like in this process of like, I need to grieve after my first glass of wine because there's contentment and it does not last. So I think there's that moment of like moving into desire where there's contentment, or there's contentment with like what is, and yet there's also, we're not meant to live there. we're meant to kind of continue to open and grow in what we long for, which brings us to, I think, plateaus of like, oh, this is good, and yet also the reality of it does not last, not on this side. So anyways, I'll be grieving from now on after my first glass of wine. Okay, so maybe like one last question, and then I'll have to hop off. But any question before we go? And no worries if not. We're so grateful for your presence here. Where can we get course group details? Great. You have Nancy's email, correct? Okay. Let me put that in the chat. It probably came through, I guess it came through Eventbrite. Let me,
Yeah, I'll try to put the group in the chat as well. Find it. How you can get more information, how you can enroll.
you're doing that, Tara? Is that what you said?
Yes,
Okay.
trying to do it quickly.
And I think the workshop most likely will be probably towards the mid to end October, maybe beginning of November, just to give you a sense of what we're thinking with the workshop. Slowly but surely, it will happen.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Julianne. Appreciate it. Yeah, grateful for you all.
okay. I may have lied. I don't know that I can find it in fast enough time for everyone for us to be able to go. But I'm sure that Nancy will send out a follow-up email
Yeah,
today.
that is true. So why don't you, wait on Nancy's follow-up email, because she has everything, all of your emails from the Eventbrite.
Mhm.
So yeah, stay tuned. And we hope to see you in some form of what we're offering. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.